Welcome everyone to the Atomic Cinema Experiment. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tara.
Greetings, citizens.
This is our science fiction movie podcast. We get together, we've watched the movie, and we talk about it. It's really quite that simple. Although, this one's a little bit different. For the first time ever on this show, I believe, we're doing two films together in the one episode. And it'll be pretty obvious why when I say what they are. We're going to be talking about the original 1933 King Kong and the original 1954 Godzilla. And we're going to be talking about these two films. Obviously, we're doing this because there's a Godzilla versus King Kong film coming up in about 2 months' time. At least at the time of recording. By the time this goes out, maybe a little bit less than that. And yeah, I mean, we're going to do the new films that are tied to the new entry coming out. So over the next month or so, you're going to be seeing Godzilla 2014, Kong Skull Island, and Godzilla King of the Monsters. Obviously, there's a ton of Godzilla movies. There's at least a few Kong movies as well from the history books. We'll get to those at some point later. When there's other stuff coming out, or there's more reasons to do them, we'll go back and do the 70s Kong and all the rest of it. But obviously we had...
Son of Kong.
And Son of Kong. But we only had a couple months notice because they just went, hey, this is coming out in March. And they did that in January. It was like, oh shit, we can't do 29 Godzilla movies in 2 months. Not without killing ourselves. So, therefore, we had to pick and choose and make it simpler and do the relevant ones in the originals, and we'll go back to all the other stuff later. But we thought to spice things up because me and Connor actually talked about the original Godzilla about 3 or 4 years ago now. So to spice this up, we thought it'd be interesting to do Godzilla and King Kong together, and we can compare them a little bit at the end, and so on and so on. So that is the plan. That's what we're doing. And we've both seen both of these before, right? I think.
No, this is my first time watching Kong.
Oh, well, there you go. So that's some excitement.
I've seen the 70s one with what's her face?
I've never seen the 70s one, so I can't help you.
Jessica Lange. Got it.
I don't know who that is, so that was never happening. So when we get to the 70s one, it'll be a first time for me. I mean, I've only seen this. I've seen 2005's King Kong, the Peter Jackson one, and I've seen Kong Skull Island, which we'll be talking about soon, but I've never seen the 70s one. I've never seen Son of Kong or any of the other ones. I have seen King Kong versus Godzilla, which is the third Godzilla movie, and when we get to the Japanese Godzilla movies, we'll aside from this original, we'll talk about that then, but yeah, for some reason I've never seen any of the middle Kong films, just the original and the newest ones. But yes, so I mean, we will do a sort of general spoiler free. We'll give our sort of general feelings on both movies to start off, I think, and sort of give general ideas. In terms of what they are, I mean, if you don't know what King Kong and Godzilla are, King Kong, it's a crazy filmmaker wants to take an actress to Skull Island because he's heard of this legend of a beast named Kong, and he wants to capture it. And he's known for doing extreme, dangerous photography out in the wild and getting shots of tigers and shit in jungles next to actors.
Yeah, he's got some fun stories.
So we have that, and then they go there, and of course there's the tribe, the locals all worship Kong, and eventually they want to give this young blonde actress up to Kong as a what's the word I'm looking for?
A bride?
A bride? Oh, so sure, yes. I was thinking more of an offering, when you give something to a god, you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, and then of course it becomes a monster movie. There's dinosaurs in Skull Island as well as Kong, and there's chaos and stuff. And I won't spoil too much, but I mean, if you know anything about Kong, you probably know it eventually ends in New York City, with Kong in the city. So. You've got that, and then alternatively Godzilla, of course, is the giant lizard creature, which is an allegory for the nuclear bomb made in Japan less than a decade after the nuclear bombs were dropped in Japan, so very culturally relevant. And again, you got monster movies, much more of a horror film, I would argue, and a sort of grand scale as Godzilla, I think. But we'll start with Kong. We'll go, in terms of the spoiler-free section here, we'll start chronological, and we'll look at Kong first. And you'd never seen this, so I'm very curious to ask the question. Tara, what did you think of King Kong?
I loved it. I really liked it a lot. It was surprisingly fun. There's some problematic elements to it, but I could see why it was a hit. It was super fun to watch, a really cool adventure. And the island is like full of way more stuff than just Kong, which also made it really fun. And I enjoyed the stop motion of it too. You know, it takes like some crazy like 150 hours to make like 1 minute of stop motion, and there's a lot of minutes in this, so I bet like the bonus features would be really interesting to watch.
Just so I mean, I've got the Blu-ray, and the making of, which has got chapters, is like 2 hours and 45 minutes long. I checked. I didn't watch it. I didn't have time, but I checked. I checked. I was curious, how long is this? And it was that long. Yeah, King Kong's an interesting film to talk about because in many ways, now I'm sure there was short films, I'm sure there was other tests and stuff done, but it's kind of the pioneer in this kind of movie. It's let's do some giant monster, let's do something that's fantastical with big effects, and obviously the effects are very dated by anyone's standards. They're essentially the first attempt at doing something like this on a grand Hollywood scale, but that's kind of ultimately how I feel about the original King Kong. It's very important to cinema history. It's important to the types of cinema we like. Not that everything, and I don't just mean monster movies, I think it's any kind of science fiction is kind of traced back to just the creativeness of going, can we do this? Can we pull off this spectacle of this giant ape and whatever? And
I think it has the first Scream Queen in it, because Fay Wray has to scream a lot.
She does have to scream a lot. Yes, there's a lot of interesting lines of dialogue about a woman being on a ship in this, which definitely feels of its time.
Yes.
But I have to say I don't love King Kong. I don't like it as much as some other monster movies. I do kind of see it as this prototype that's very important to cinema history, but not necessarily one that I enjoy watching as much as other things. For example,
I mean, like, we won't talk about the ending right now, but I will say the ending I thought was really, really strong for Kong. More so than for Godzilla. Not that we're doing our comparisons right now, but like, I really thought the ending was powerful. And I mean, I'm sure people all know about it, but I didn't know like all the specifics that you get to see.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure I saw a 2005 one first, so going back to the original and see, because obviously 2005 one, okay, we're in the modern, I mean, it's actually 16 years old now, believe it or not. Time has flown by, but
yeah, that's a long film if I remember that, but I remember enjoying it. Especially like the bug scene, I thought was really, really good, really nasty.
Yeah, I remember being kind of lukewarm overall because I felt it was too long and I felt like it dragged, which is kind of my problem with like every Peter Jackson movie I've seen outside of like Brain Dead. But I mean, maybe I'll feel different when I rewatch it. Maybe I'll feel different when I go back to it when we do it eventually. But because I do think that there's some weird things with the characters in this movie. And I guess it's almost like a weird cliche thing to say now with a monster movie that the human parts are the worst parts and the monsters are what you're here for, because technically that's true to you know, for a lot of movies. But there are some interesting things in this that I don't know if they don't quite land for me, because I feel like the character who deserves comeuppance, for example, doesn't really get any comeuppance or learn anything or realize that they've done anything wrong. You know, that's kind of the one element that kind of sticks out to me.
That's true.
And you know, it kind of, and once it gets to the monster stuff, and this is both a compliment and a negative in a weird way, but the compliment part of it is that once it gets to the monster stuff, it is just kind of like non-stop monster stuff from that point on. There's very little slowing down and doing anything else. But the downside to that is that it's kind of missing any kind of important character beats or like themes or arcs or anything. I don't really feel like I get to care about any characters.
You get so many good dolls.
There's a lot of dolls and puppets and stuff like falling from things. Yes, I
just enjoyed watching that so much.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot
of deaths in King Kong, which was really fun to see, because I think this is a pre-Hays Code film, so it's fun to see like Kong munching on people and stuff.
Yeah, So I like Kong a lot. I don't love it though. I think some people like really cherish this because of what it means to cinema history, and I get it. I totally do. But
it's better than Citizen Kane.
I'd have to go back and watch Citizen Kane again, but my gut instinct is to say I don't agree with that. That's my gut instinct. But I mean, do we? It's kind of obvious given what I've said, so I don't suppose it's a surprise to say that I think Godzilla's a better film than King Kong. But I mean, Do you want to reveal?
Well, it also has a 21-year advantage.
True. But I'm not talking about necessarily the effects or the monster side of it per se. I just think it's a better film overall. I mean, do you want to reveal which one you prefer? If you have a...
I would say yes, Godzilla is better, but I would say only slightly for me.
Okay.
I really did enjoy Kong a lot. Like I liked the like sacrifice scene where she's being offered to Kong, and once Kong shows up, which admittedly takes a while, he's not there until like 50 minutes in, but like once all that started going, like I was really into it.
Yeah, it's pretty much the halfway point. Once he shows up though, he's there a lot. Like it's not like he disappears then after that. He is there consistently after that fact. So.
But yeah, I mean, obviously there are some themes in Kong that are pretty heavy, but for the most part, like you're not dealing with a post-nuclear society that has felt the effects of it and now have to like juggle with the fact that they are again dealing with something caused by America. to
use that as a transition over to Godzilla, then I think Godzilla, to me, when I watch it, it always feels like it's about something, and I don't necessarily feel that when I'm watching Kong. And I'm sure some historians might say, "Oh, this is in the early 1930s, this is what was going on, and this is what everyone felt, so this is what it was saying about the time period." But when I'm watching Godzilla, everything feels like it's really about something, and I get the message, and I feel the relevance still today of why this was made in 1954. And I do think there's more heartbreaking moments in Godzilla, unlike a lot of the sequels, which get a bit more just silly and fun and goofy and whatever. The original Godzilla is a haunting, striking film with some really horrific, like beautiful images of Godzilla in the city. I think there's some wonderful melancholy stuff where it really deals with the tragedy of what's happening.
Well, I think the end of Kong deals with all of that too. Like, there's also just the fact of like where Kong is, and like his downfall like is pretty heavy stuff.
You can convince me when we're talking about it. I don't necessarily feel the same.
I don't really want to say too much.
Yeah, we're not at the endings yet, but yes. I don't really feel much like, because Kong to me in King Kong, and this is kind of unlike the later versions, which kind of try to go more into the sympathy of Kong. I don't necessarily feel that in the original King Kong he's ever anything other than just a villain. It kind of just feels...
I disagree entirely. Especially in the last scene, like the scene plays out where there's no music for a while, and you're just watching him like go through something.
Would you stop talking about the final scene?
And then when like the music kicks in, it's like this somber melancholy, like, oh, like this is really tragic what's happening.
Anything in the movie bar the ending, please.
And really, like, I really think that Godzilla, like in the first film, he is a villain. Like there's versus Kong, who I think is just.
He is. That was not a comparison between the two films. I was not saying that Godzilla is not a villain in his film. Godzilla is absolutely a villain in his film.
Yeah. Okay. I thought you were going to say that. So, yeah, but I think Godzilla is very much just like the big bad that we have to defeat. Whereas Kong, I feel sorry for him.
So in Godzilla, the reason why I think it is far more impactful is because ultimately it's all about human error. It's about what humans have done. It's always about what we caused. Godzilla is just a representation for what we did, and all to the very end. And I think the ending of Godzilla is way more powerful than Kong. I think we're going to really disagree with that when we start talking about it. I think it is a better visual. I think it has more to say about humanity. It's got more of a message about going forward for the future. It's all these things. Godzilla to me is about something almost unstoppable that was created because of our own arrogance and our own stupidity, which honestly, watching this in the middle of the pandemic just made some parts of this film even more relevant to me as I was watching it. There's a moment early on in Godzilla where there's already been some boats that have been sank, there's already been some ships that have went down, there's been a fishing village that's been attacked, and the next target that Godzilla attacks is this like party boat with like people partying and there's like lights all up and they're all singing and dancing and music and they're drinking, and all I could think was, you idiots. And I remember thinking this in previous viewings. I'm like 7 ships have already been attacked off the coast of Japan. Why are you idiots doing this after 2020?
Godzilla isn't real.
After 2020, I buy these idiots would do this because humanity are a bunch of stupid idiots, and I'm trying really hard not to swear. Right, so I think like, I don't want to put down, because I think Kong's really important from a cinema history point of view, but I think it's an important film that I enjoy watching for the value of it, for what it did. I don't necessarily think I enjoy it as much as I do a lot of other like classic films, whereas Godzilla, I think it's completely enjoyable. It's still very relevant, and I think the images, even though obviously some of the effects don't hold up, there's some toy like fire trucks being knocked over and stuff that you can definitely see and whatever.
The helicopter is particularly bad, I think.
Yeah. But I think the images of Godzilla in the city and the fire behind him and the going, the fire in the water and all that, I think it's so haunting and beautiful at the same time. And that's something that, well, there's some great shots in Kong. There absolutely is. I don't know if I ever feel anything close to what I feel when I'm watching Godzilla. There's like a sort of existential like feeling in Godzilla, whereas in King Kong it's a fun monster movie. I don't necessarily get the hit of the emotions in it.
I don't know. There's something about seeing Kong like chained up and put on display, which maybe is a bit of a spoiler, but I'm sure everyone knows that part happens. That I think is pretty dark.
Can I just point out that the format of this was supposed to be that we'd compare them after we talk about them at the end, and I just love that. And
we've never done this before. I
know, and I love that we've just immediately done this and just started comparing them right off the bat with. No, and this is on both of us. This is not you. This is not me. This is both of us doing this. But
okay, yes. Well, sure, yeah, it's both of us. But you definitely started with. Well, I like Godzilla more.
Because you were being too positive on Kong. I had to counterbalance. I did not expect you to commit to this to be the pro Kong person.
Well, I'm still pro Godzilla. Also, I like both of them. I don't like Skull Island. I can spoil that now.
Well, we'll get to those.
I was not a fan of that film.
We'll get to those juicy details in the coming weeks. Okay, where do we go from here? I guess we get a spoiler warning. We just start talking about each of them individually.
Sounds good.
That sound like a plan? Okay. So I'll use this time to thank our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Sharp, Bornow, Al Treisman, Christopher Moy, Brett Williams, and David Brown. They are Patreon producers for the month, so thank you very much to them. You can, of course, support us for much less than what it takes to be a producer, though, can't you, Tara?
That's right. If you enjoy our reviews, please check out our Patreon page. It's patreon.com/MouthFuzzTV. And if you donate as low as $1 per month, you'll get access to bonus episodes for the Ace, including you get Judge Dredd, you get Time Cop, a bunch of David Carradine films, Garrett Graham films, which I'm sure you're all looking for. Red Brown has made an appearance a few times, so please go over and check that out and find your favorite B movie. Thank you.
All right. Well, full spoilers then for both King Kong and Godzilla, if you happen to not know details of these two very old films. But, yeah, King Kong, Joe gets me about King Kong watching it again, because I'd kind of forgotten some of the early stuff in the film, is that, so it starts with a scene where it's just setting up that they're taking a boat out, and you got, Denham, the director, who wants to go out. And the other guy's like, there's basically a casting agent who's like, no, I'm not finding any actresses to go in your. And even this conversation before we even get to like meeting Fay Ray's character, we get this sort of like, well, one woman on a whole ship full of grunts. Like, this is a terrible idea. Like, and you're not even telling them where you're going or how long it's going to be. Like, this is all very fishy and sounds horrible. And he's like, well, I don't even want a woman in my movie. I'm only putting a woman in my movie because all the press from my last movie said, it needs a woman, it needs a love interest, it needs romance.
Checks out.
Yeah, so Right. So that's the setup
So
for
the
what he's
producers
doing.
are breathing down his neck, like make sure you put a woman in it.
It's yeah, but Denham's such a unsympathetic character to me that I can't get on his side, even though.
See, I do find that he has some sympathy. I think he's acted pretty well. Like he should be somebody that you hate. He should be the villain of the movie, and he kind of is. But I don't know. There's something about him I still find a bit of sympathy for. I like his story about how he doesn't use a cameraman anymore because the last cameraman like got out of the way from like a charging rhino or something instead of keeping the shot going.
Yeah, I do think he's a villain. I'll just counter that with yes, he is a villain. I don't, because I mean, he basically kidnaps this woman off the street, right? He goes out in New York City.
Oh yeah, he does kind of kidnap her actually,
and he just starts looking around for a woman because he needs to leave the next morning. Because if they wait any longer, then people will start snooping around the fact that they've got so many explosives on the ship, and they have to get permits and like, hey, you've got enough like explosives here to like.
Yeah, we don't have to deal with that bureaucracy. Let's just go.
Some good old
make the greatest movie in the world, and then we can apologize later.
Yeah, with no script, might I add, or anything else.
But he doesn't know what he's going to come across. It's done Curb Your Enthusiasm style.
But she goes to she's basically still an apple. The idea that she's starving, she's not got a job, and he's like, you're beautiful, and he basically just grabs her and takes her. And I thought he was going to take her straight to the ship. It does at least they took her to a diner first to kind of offer her.
Well,
the job.
I think she was like fainting out of like illness or something. So he's like, well, I'm going to get you to like a place where you can feel better.
Oh, she does. Yeah, she does technically faint, but I still thought he was like abducting her after she fainted.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's still very much felt
it definitely
ease.
comes off like a little bit sinister in the beginning, but then like, oh no, he's just trying to get her back to health, and he is going to get her permission first before he takes her on a boat.
Yes,
to an island.
Yes, but he does conveniently leave out a lot of details. And
yes, I'm
just going to put this out there. If him saying the sentence like this is all in the up and up, no funny business, I'm like, I don't know if I trust you. You actually having to go out your way to say that makes me trust you less. Maybe that's a modern
I think because of the circumstances they're in also, where it's just like, I don't know, you just picked me up off the street and you're offering me money or a role. I don't know what kind of a film this is. Maybe it's a dirty movie. And then he says, no funny business. Like, at least it's not that type of film.
Okay. I mean,
that's what I got from the scene. Like, he was trying to convince her it wasn't that kind of film.
I will accept that she is starving and she's desperate, and that's why she's willing to take a risk with this dude. But that's basically the only reason why I would accept this, because everything else about this is red flags.
He's a famous filmmaker also. Like, she knows who he is.
Well, she's heard of his name. It isn't to like give her ID. She doesn't know what it looks like.
No, she's taking his word for it, sure. But like, that is also there. Like, it's like if Steven Spielberg came up to me, like, okay, at least I know who you are. So if you're telling me you're going to put me in a movie, at least there's some credibility there.
Yes. But imagine if like Steven Spielberg was this like enigmatic director who made a point of never been photographed and he didn't know what he looked like. So this guy just comes up to goes, I'm Steven Spielberg. I'm going to put you in my movie.
I might still trust him. Yeah.
Why? No. That's lead to your death, Tara.
I know.
Don't be this trusting. But I mean, everything with like, because I hate watching old movies where like they'll have the one woman character faint at everything and scream, and she's just there to fall down. But even the attitude of the characters on the ship.
You hate that.
I do hate that. Yeah.
I know. I'm saying, like, you hate that. Imagine how I feel.
Yes, of course. Feel free. Elaborate.
Yeah, it's not something that I love. It's a trope. But you're watching a movie from 1933, so you kind of have to take the good with the bad. You accept that it's there and you move on. We
haven't even got to the dialogue on the ship yet with her love interest.
Yeah. He's a jerk.
I don't like a woman on the ship. You're a nuisance. You're all nuisances. To the point where later on, when he suddenly confesses his love for her, which comes like out of, almost nowhere.
Well, that's what happens when people go out to sea.
Yeah. He turns to her and says, I think I love you. And her response is, but you hate women.
You're not woman.
And he says, you're not woman. I'm like, I don't even know what this is trying to say at this point. These two are mad. Madness.
Well, they're both attractive, so that's all that matters.
And Hollywood standards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess what I'm trying to say here is that the characters are not the reason to like this movie. I don't think I like most of the characters.
Yeah, the characters are fine.
I would say less than fine for the most part. I think
The 1933 fine.
the other thing going against it, I think a little bit for me, is that the whole, like, you know, the natives who like worship Kong, all that stuff. I hate any TV episode that deals with like, oh, like this, you know, X culture has like a myth, and that's like the premise of the episode, where they have a spirit or a beast or a ghost. And a lot of TV shows, it tends to be Native Americans, but it can be a number of different things. I tend to hate those tropes, and this is far from the worst of it. And there's a couple of dodgy lines of dialogue from characters, again, of its time. He's gonna take that.
Yeah, there's a guy from China on the boat that's a little bit like, okay, his dialogue is written a bit strange, but
I wasn't even talking about. I was just talking about how some of the white characters refer to the tribe. There's a couple of dodgy lines. Yeah. But even just inherently, I don't like this trope. I've never really been fond of this trope. You know, like white civilization goes to, the spooky tribe who have something mystical. I've never been fond of that trope, and I mean, not just because of the problematic side of it, where there is a bit of, you know, especially in this time period where I like, you know, this was kind of just a default thing to do almost. But I've just never been a fan of it. So inherently, there's a portion
still
of...
not as racist as Gone with the Wind, which came out slightly later.
Oh, sure, but there's just this portion of the film that I've just never been super into. And I think what's so funny about the modern movie is that in order to have Kong sort of be around to have things like fights with Godzilla and be part of a shared universe, they have to actually not do the story of King Kong, because the story of King Kong, at least, I don't know, I've not seen the 70s one, admittedly, but at least both this and the 2005 one end the same way. They both ultimately try to do the same story, where Kong tragically dies eventually at the end, because, as you know, beauty killed the beast. Which they say in this movie. Well, they don't say that specific line, but they refer to Beauty and the Beast a lot in this movie. It's brought up quite a bit.
I like the comparison more of like, so like on the ship they have a little monkey that they like is a pet and they play around with, and I like the idea of a giant ape using a human as the humans do with the baby monkey on board the ship. So it's a little bit of a role reversal that we get there that's unexpected. So we don't really know why Kong likes blonde girls, but it's not like a beauty attraction thing. It's just like, it's a plaything that he wants to have.
Yeah, cool. I mean, this tribe's been apparently giving him women for ever. Like, this is just a constant thing they do, is they give him sacrifices. And what exactly does he do with these women? I don't know. I mean, the whole blonde thing is just that he's never seen a blonde woman. I think because even the tribe's like, wait, there's this golden goddess. We've never seen a blonde woman before. It's kind of their attitude.
Right.
Yeah. It gets better once the monster stuff starts, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like, I appreciate what this is from a filmmaking perspective and like a creativity perspective. Like, okay, let's do these monsters things. And once you start getting to the effects where they you know, the tribe come and kidnap Fay Ray, they take her and put her up in the shackles up at the door, and Kong comes and gets her. From that point on, when it becomes like, you know, there's some great sequences of like I particularly like Kong when he's like, and I'm not even sure how they shot this exactly, but he's kind of reaching down.
There's a lot of interesting special effects. Yeah.
He's kind of reaching down to get one of the guys in like a sort of cave area, and it's all kind of in shot. Obviously, there's some close-ups where they've got like a big like Kong hand puppet.
Right. Most of it seems to be stop motion, but there is a couple of like life-size parts of Kong that we see. We see a foot, we see a hand, and we see his head.
Yeah, obviously there's a mouth, because at one point there was a shot of like someone like slowly dying in his mouth.
Yeah.
Which maybe one of the best shots of the movie. Yeah.
I like watching Kong chomp on some people. Chomp chomp.
That stuff's good. Obviously some dinosaurs as well. There's a pterodactyl at one point, and I thought the pterodactyl was a neat touch because the pterodactyl's kind of like a foreshadowing of the ending, because it's like, hey, this is how Kong deals with a flying enemy kind of thing, and given the scale versus this to Kong and the planes at the end, they're actually a very similar size. The pterodactyl, if anything, is bigger than one of those planes from the end. So that's
pterodactyls don't have bullets though.
That's true. It's a very straightforward. It's actually very straightforward because once she's kidnapped, it's like, okay, we have to try and go get her. A bunch of the men die. Kong actually, they're on like this log that's like going over a crevice, and Kong just starts spinning it until they all fall off.
You think it would be like one or two, but nope, it's all of them. I like the. I heard actually that in that scene they all fall into a crevice, and they actually did film the like insects and stuff attacking the people in that scene, and that's actually how they all died. But I don't know, I guess that footage has been lost over time, and so you can't get it anymore.
There's an extra on the Blu-ray about this, I think, with storyboards and stuff to show, like, and it's in the Peter Jackson movie, like
right, and it's one of the best scenes in that film. Other stuff here, because there's like kind of an attitude from the men, the humans, to just like bomb everything the first time they see anything, because there's like a stegosaurus just sort of sauntering around, and they start throwing grenades at it, and it's just like, wow, I wasn't doing anything. Stegosaurus just hanging out. There's a brontosaurus that eats a guy after he runs into a tree and tries to like go back and forth around the tree to avoid him, and eventually gets chomped.
Yeah, these are all pretty much back to back. This is like a solid like 15 minutes here after she's kidnapped, where the guys run into like beyond the wall to like try and chase after her. That we just have this carnage, and we have this, and eventually a love interest man, the first officer or whoever the rank was in the boat. He goes after her, and even this is a really fun sequence because right after the pterodactyl, where he's like, okay, Kong's distracted enough that he's going to get to Fei Ray, and he's made like a sort of vine rope to go down the side of this cliff that Kong's up on top of. And I do actually love the image of Kong like sort of pulling it up, and then they start getting pulled back up from it until they let go.
That was fun.
That's a neat visual. But then ultimately essentially one grenade takes Kong down, which this is one of these things you get a lot in these old movies where
it's some sort of gas grenade they established would knock out an elephant, or like 4 of them or something.
Yeah, there's a bit of exposition, but I find this a lot in old movies, where a lot of things that in modern movies we expect to take a lot more firepower and a lot more ingenuity, or there's a lot of old movies where they'll kill the thing with fire at the end, and that's all it takes is some fire, whereas in the modern movies, that's what you try first, and then there's like 10 different ideas before you finally get to the thing that'll work. Which isn't necessarily a good or a bad thing, but it's just we're so used to how it's done now that it's like, oh, one grenade did it, okay, Kong's down, all right. he's out for the count, and that's your island stuff. There's also obviously there's a lot of stuff with them bringing her to the island when they should have left her on the boat, which obviously is everyone's like, oh, they've got a blonde. Kong will love that. Let's get her for Kong. We'll trade you 5 of ours for her.
Yeah, we'll trade you 5 of our women. I think it was 6 even. And I think the T-Rex scene is really good too, because Kong, like you see Kong like holding a doll basically, and then sets her on the tree and she turns into Fei Ray. I really like the transitions that they do.
There's some stuff later on where she herself is stop motion because they put the arms filling around. Yeah,
it's fun to watch. And and you could see the T-Rex like approaching her while Kong is trying to fight off some other people, and you're like, oh no, she's gonna get eaten, but of course Kong saves the day.
Yeah, it's amazing that's the one that I glossed over, actually. I'm glad you brought that up. People would have hated me for not bringing up the T-Rex scene.
It's a really good scene. It's really fun. And of course, Kong, like, defeats the T-Rex the same way he always does, by breaking the jaw. It's brutal.
I mean, you say it always does, but this would have been the first time. This is the where that started.
The way I know that's the way I know he attacks.
This is why
he likes to break jaws.
They always do that. Although I think it's more impressive when there's some atomic breath to fire back down the old gullet. All I'm saying.
We shall see.
We shall see. I mean, not to spoil thoughts on another movie, but there was a moment in that 2014 Godzilla where I'm like, oh, he's doing the Kong thing, that's cool. And then he starts lighting up, and I'm like, oh my god, he's going to shit it down his mouth.
Yeah, it's funny because when I watched it too, I forgot about the atomic breath. I'm like, oh yeah, he could do that.
I was like, yeah, so bad. That was so badass. Godzilla. But yeah, so of course, Denim wants to capture Kong, and when he knocks him out, he's like, oh, let's chain him up on a raft, and we'll take him back to New York, because that's a great idea. And there's no come up. You know, so I'm not a fan of Lost World, Jurassic Park, right? And neither were you, for that matter, right? We were not positive on it. It's
no, I mean, there's some
sequel.
good scenes in it, if not great scenes, but for the most part, it's not a very good film.
Yes, but what's the one thing that I'm going to compare to King Kong here, and bizarrely say that Lost World, because obviously Lost World has kind of a similar back chunk where the T-Rex is brought to the city, right? It's brought to San Diego. Yeah. But the one thing that movie gets right that Kong doesn't do is that the bad guy who brought him here out of his hubris and stupid showmanship gets his comeuppance. He gets eaten. And it's quite a brutal scene, to be honest. It's very villainous. But you're rooting for his death, and you're like, yes. And at no point does Denim, in this movie, ever even realize he's done anything wrong. No one ever blames him for what happens. No one ever says anything to him that it's his fault that he decided to chain up. Which, I mean, even that on its own, the fact that he's caging this beast and saying, oh, you belong to us now as a piece of, you know, entertainment, and you're not free. That's obviously problematic on its own, and villainous. But what's another one?
You're right. He doesn't get his comeuppance, and in a modern day movie, he would, I think, and he should. In this film, he does not. He's just there to deliver the final line, and I do think that's a mistake. But because I do really sympathize with Kong once he's chained up. Like he's in the urban jungle, and he doesn't know how to deal with it, and he does the things that are familiar with him. He grabs his comfort girl and takes her, to the highest peak that he can find for safety.
I think that's because I agree that there's some sympathy for him. I guess. I mean, I was maybe a bit brash when I said there wasn't, because obviously he is chained up, and like this is villainous what's happening to him. I think the reason why I still see him as villainous though is once he's out in the city, once he's broken free, is he literally at one point pulls a random woman out of her apartment. She's asleep, and he just pulls her out of her apartment, looks at her and goes, oh, this isn't mine, and just goes whoop and throws her. And she just falls to her death. And I love
that scene actually. Yeah,
it's a great scene. But as far as making me sympathetic towards King Kong, not so much.
Well, he shouldn't be there. Like he's doing what he knows, and like nobody. When you watch Shark Week and you watch like these people who have these stories about surviving a shark attack, they never blame the shark.
Oh, of course. Okay, let me clarify something here. King Kong, and admittedly, maybe that's not true in this original film as much, right? But King Kong to me has always been more intelligent than that. And that's why I expect him to have some kind of simple moral compass. Nothing too extreme, but some sort of simple, not acting out of cruelty.
I mean, he does have some. Like, he does save Fay Ray before he dies.
Has one plaything, yes, but not anyone else.
Well, he doesn't he doesn't grab her and let her fall too. Like, he sets her safely on top of the tower before he can't hold on anymore.
That's true, but I mean, I don't see that as sympathetic as much as he cares about the one person he's obsessed with, and everyone else is just fodder to be killed. Because, like I say, he just throws the other women away, and like she falls to her death. He intentionally basically destroys train tracks of an oncoming train, and then that train just sort of crashes and.
Well, he shouldn't be there. He's in this world he doesn't understand, and everyone's yelling at him or screaming at him or trying to attack him, and it's just he's being defensive.
Do you think the movie needs a character that kind of feels sympathetic towards him to try and actually kind of give some of these ideas a bit more spotlight?
Yeah. I think if Fay Ray's character does, that would be more powerful.
Yes. Instead, she's just screaming.
I think the more modern Kongs do that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's something definitely added in with the modern versions, because I think it's one of the other reasons why I feel it's lacking here. And it's not even so much that I have an attachment to the Kong story that I think it should be bettered per se, but just watching this on its own, I do feel like some attachment missing towards the end, because I don't care about Fay Ray really. I don't really care about the human characters. because all she does is scream. She has no character really, beyond just.
She does in the beginning, and then
She has a little bit at the start.
She just becomes like his plaything.
It's actually one of the interesting things I was comparing between the two films, because I do think Godzilla's a better movie, but one of the points I was going to kind of give Kong early on in the film is that Godzilla starts off very kind of like just like plot beat, it's just boom, 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 and it cuts from like
it's a very fast film actually.
Yeah.
You go right into Godzilla. You don't have to wait.
Yeah, but it's like the first like 20 minutes say are just boom, 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 news report. Here's the thing that happens on a ship. Here's some responses to it, and it kind of lacks an introduction to the characters. But luckily, Godzilla does slow down and does let you get to know the core trio that we kind of do care about a bit more by the end. I think Kong has the opposite problem, where it starts off a bit slower, which I think is a good thing, and lets you get to know Fei Rei's character. It gets you let to know, even though he's kind of an asshole by modern standards, or love interest man, and it does get a sense of who the characters are. But once the monster stuff starts, it kind of just goes away. All in the fact that he wants to save her. That's the only thing that there's going on, is that he wants to save Fei Rei, and that's it.
Yeah, and Denim is still obsessed with getting rich and being famous for something, for his discovery. But
there's not really much of like an arc, I guess, for anyone, I would say.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that. The part that makes me sympathetic is when, after Kong has climbed up the Empire State Building and he's surrounded by helicopters and they're shooting at him. And I really noticed that there was a lack of music here. Like, it was just just Kong being bombarded with bullets and looking at himself and seeing that he's bleeding and like getting more and more scared. And because there's no music there, like, I really felt the impact of, this is really sad what I'm watching. And when he does eventually fall and the music kicks in, and it's really like melancholy. Like, it's not like a triumphant song. I think at least the composer knew what kind of a scene it was supposed to be, because he probably felt it too. And when he falls, it's not like a graceful fall. Like, he hits the tower a couple times on the way down too.
Oh yeah, no, the fall is good. The fall itself is really, I mean, honestly, the whole scene at the top of the Empire State Building is good.
Yeah.
I have no faults with that. Like I say, the monster stuff itself is really good. The only thing that I'd say it's lacking is my more modern understanding of Kong is that I'm supposed to be a bit more sympathetic, because he's a bit more intelligent and has a bit more of a moral compass, and he's not just because I think when we get to Kong Skull Island, it obviously didn't do the exact plot of the original Kong, but I think the one thing they tried to give him is this idea that he, it's not just that he's in love with Brie Larson and that's why he wants to save her. He's a bit more she's
well, he's protecting all of the creatures on the island.
Yeah, so they do the thing, and Godzilla's kind of done the same thing as well, where he started off representing something monstrous and villainous, but then of course he's popular, so by the time we start introducing more monsters, it's like, no, now he's our defender, he's the one saving us from all these worst things, which is kind of problematic when you think about what he represented in the first place.
Right.
But I mean, I don't think that's the point of the sequels of Godzilla. I think it's just no, we've got a fun character with what he is, so it's fine. But I mean, the ending's good. With the exception of the final little line, I think I don't like the "it was beauty that killed the beast" moment, because I don't actually think the film earns that moment at all.
Yeah, I guess they were trying to say like it was the pretty girl that was his one weakness or something, but it really was the like the airplanes and stuff that killed him. So.
Well, no, I think it'd be fine if, because I mean, he does put her down, right? But like, would he really have like won against the planes if he didn't like try to protect her as well? It didn't seem like that in the scene. They did a poor job, because I think that's if I'm going to critique the effects, which is obviously almost a pointless thing to do with a 1933, the dawn of special effects as we consider them.
Yeah, a lot of things had to be invented in order to make this film.
But if I am going to critique a little bit, and I just mean this a little bit, just from a modern perspective, is that it's not always like, I'd say the Kong, because the primitive nature of the effects, they can only do so much with his body language. They can't do subtle things in the same way that he can do with better effects and modern techniques. So it does have to kind of rely on a bit more over the top things, and I think some stuff isn't necessarily communicated as clearly. Like, I think when he gets shot, they have him like check his bullet wound like 4 times just to make it really clear to us that he's been shot, because the way they're doing the special effects don't allow for like a proper gunshot moment where you can really see the splatter and blah blah blah.
Right.
So there's some crutches, and
This
I think,
isn't Andy Serkis playing Kong.
I mean, that'd be good.
Well, good news then. He plays Kong in the Peter Jackson movie.
Does he?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't actually know that.
That's Andy Serkis.
That's funny, because obviously he went on to do the Apes movies, and much smaller apes, obviously, but
Yep. But he has experience.
he had experience. He did Kong already. Yeah. So I don't want to take anything away from it. I don't want anyone to take me critiquing that they can't do this like extra bit of emotion and there's some limitations to the effect. I'm just pointing out what the limitations are to kind of show maybe where some of this extra emotion that could be there isn't coming from in the scene itself. I think there is an element of like suspension of disbelief a little bit when you're watching movies with effects of this time period. It's just the nature of the beast. It's just what it is. What it is. But I do like the ending a lot. I think the fall is brutal. I think him slowly like trying to hold on and then eventually letting go and then hitting part of the building as he falls down looks really good. Surprisingly good, in fact. But yeah, I don't feel it the same way that other people do. I don't think, for whatever
He does
reason.
like pick her back up like before he falls and then sets her back down and then falls.
It's like to say goodbye. Yeah, it's like a moment of goodbye.
Yeah.
But I don't know if they actually built a relationship between them. I think that's one of the things that, again, I'm not saying it's a better movie because I don't think I'm going to think it is when I see it again. But I think that's something that the newer films do try to do, is to try to actually build a relationship between them. Where, kind of like a Betty and Hulk kind of thing, where there's kind of like an understanding, there's a connection where she does care about him. Because there's never a moment in this where I think she cares about him. Like, she's just scared of him the entire time.
Yeah,
right? This
She
is not
just
a
doesn't want to be his
two-way.
bride.
Yeah, this is a two-way. This is not a two-way thing. This is a one-sided relationship. Kong is basically a stalker, who's kidnapped a woman, and yes.
I wish I could see the Broadway musical. I don't know if maybe it's not a musical, but there is a Broadway show of Kong that I wish I could see.
Yeah, and I've got a feeling that the comments are going to be negative towards my opinion on Kong, and I'm going to rate it quite well for what it is, because I do think it's important to film history. I think everything that it achieved, and there's so many things that I love that wouldn't exist without King Kong being there to kind of start things
Honestly,
off.
like a lot of the special effects, I don't know how they did. Like they're some of them, like obviously I wouldn't call it seamless in that you can't, like you don't know how you can't tell the difference between what's real and what's not, because obviously you can. But it is like the transitions between what's fake and real is pretty seamless. Like when Kong puts her down and it's just Fay Ray there, like that looks good,
I mean, it's just editing, really, just good editing.
Well, sure, but like there's a lot of like superimposed images, and then obviously like they're filming in front of a rear projection or a front projection or something, and then like there's a lot of other tricks that are happening here, but some of it looks like really good, just the different interactions of people in the scene with Kong, and I like watching everybody get smushed by his feet too. I like the deaths in the movie. There's some good deaths.
There's some pretty good deaths. I don't deny this. I think it's a technical showpiece. Honestly, in many ways, obviously, it's given this importance because it is this historical artifact almost of filmmaking. But I do actually think it is very comparable in a lot of ways to a lot of modern blockbusters that people say are just about the spectacle and the effects. I think the importance here, of course, is that this was truly pioneering a lot of things. But I think it has a lot of similar problems in that I don't think the story is necessarily that great. Like, the story's fine, it serves the purpose of what it's doing, but it's all about the monsters, it's all about the big spectacle and the action. And it's really impressive.
Well, I mean, there's some messages there about like trying, like the hubris of man still. Like it is still our fault that we caused all this destruction by bringing Kong. Like we thought we could control him, but we can't control nature. Like Kong is like a hurricane when he's in a city. He's nothing but destructive. He shouldn't be there.
Yeah, I mean, that is there a little bit, but it's not like at the forefront. It's not
I mean, it happens instantly. Like, this is the first night they're going to show Kong, and he breaks out and starts destroying the city.
Well, yeah, but I don't think that message is at the forefront of the film, and I don't think that it's trying to say something super deep or anything like that. You know, they wanted to make a movie with a giant ape causing destruction, and at the time that was a really difficult and novel thing to try and pull off. And I think from a film history point of view, like if you're into filmmaking and if you care about the history of cinema, I think this is a very important film to watch and look for how they did it and sort of appreciate what they somehow managed to pull off at a time before lots of other things were developed. Because this is before. I mean, this is before. You brought up Citizen Kane earlier. Citizen Kane developed a lot of just raw filmmaking techniques, so you know, ways to move the camera, ways to edit, things like that. So they were doing this before we even kind of started doing more advanced camera moves and stuff like that. So there's a lot of inventive stuff going. There's a lot of truly magical, like, it's a magical time for cinema because there's a lot of things happening like that. But
it does feel like a magical film also. Like once those gates open and you see when everybody goes beyond what is natural to us, and we're in the jungle and we see all these monsters and great beasts from ancient times. Like that is, I mean, that's cool. Like it's like we crossed a magical barrier and we are in a different world. And yeah, I mean, I think the themes are there still. Like, I like the idea of like Kong is the king of the jungle of that world, the world that we can't survive in. But when we bring him to our world, it's technology that brings him down. Like he's no longer king of this jungle. He may be destructive, but ultimately he's killed because of technology we have. It's like the death of the ancient primitive gods. I think there's something there.
So what are you saying with that then? Like that particular point? Like what do you think it's saying something about we're moving into a new era in history and humanity where we're leaving behind myths and legends and now we're literally killing them kind of thing? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, yeah, in a way, but like, I guess that's there too. It's just the whole idea of we are, you know, because of technology, we're now the king of our jungle, and the ancient gods like Kong, the ancient species like the dinosaurs that are kings of their jungle, like they can't go toe to toe anymore.
Okay, I mean, I could see an argument for maybe saying that. Because they call him the eighth wonder of the world, and this idea that, like as soon as man finds this wonder, it's gone very quickly. Like it has to almost be destroyed very quickly. And there's maybe some message in there, in that. I don't know how well the film actually kind of pokes at those themes, though. I think.
Well, maybe that's why the filmmaker doesn't get his comeuppance. Like he's the one who keeps putting people at risk or himself at risk, thinking I'm in charge when I'm in control of this scenario. So I don't feel like I'm in danger because I'm human, therefore I'm on the top. But and maybe because that theme runs through the film, maybe that's why he still wins at the end. Yeah.
I mean. Sure, it's almost like a hubris thing here, it feels weird saying that because the directors are actually uncredited, bizarrely, which is a really weird thing. But it's really funny to me the idea that the director's like, okay, the director is not culpable for anything. The director's in the right the whole time. We're going to make a movie about a great director. He just he's in control and he takes down the monster on his own. He's not held accountable for anything after the fact. Like just a little bit.
It is odd that the directors are uncredited.
I think this is just a time when like who was classed as like credited was just really in flux. Obviously now there's a lot of rules about who gets credit. Everyone gets credited now, really. I mean, you know, outside of like maybe like sort of like cameo guest stars who are secretive and
I mean, even the craft service gets a shout out.
Exactly, yeah. There's a reason why movie credits, even on like small films now, is at least a few minutes long of like scrolling names because, and then a big budget CGI fest will have like a 10-minute long credit section because there's so many names
with 3 columns of names.
I know. You know, things have changed a little bit. So I don't want it to be. I don't want people to think I'm being harsh in this film because I do think it's very important. I do think a lot of it is very enjoyable.
I think it's a very cool film too. I like all the jungle stuff. I like the idea like the stop motion, and they had to build the jungle also in the stop motion. Like those are pretty elaborate sets.
Yeah. It's important. It's important. I don't know if it's necessarily still as enjoyable to watch as a lot of other important films. I think some important films hold up better, and maybe this is just a taste thing more than anything else. Maybe just the style that Godzilla's coming from and what it's leaning into is more my taste than kind of the more mythical island of like myths and legends that they're going for in King Kong. But yeah. So I mean, ultimately, the fight was already kind of over for me before they even began, just kind of in premise in a lot of ways. But
Sure.
also,
You want to talk about Godzilla?
we're going to Godzilla. And maybe just the final point I want to make though, and this is going to be a really negative. People don't really like what I'm going to say here, but King Kong is kind of. I mean, as far as design goes, I've never been excited by King Kong because he's just a big ape, right? He's not like Godzilla's a unique. He's like a dragon dinosaur with atomic breath. King Kong's he's a big ape. He's oversized, but he's a big ape. That's what he is.
Yeah. He's a familiar looking monster. He's still a monster.
Yeah, man is the real familiar looking monster.
It's true in both our films.
Let's move over to Godzilla. Talk about that then in depth, plot wise. So, yeah, right away this movie starts with like ships going, and we don't see it. I think one of the things I liked about this and watching it again, and I've seen this a number of times now, is how it really teases the terror of Godzilla without seeing him for a while. Because there's some really horrifying moments, and the one that stuck out to me the most actually. So after a couple of boats have went down, so 2 boats go down, and they say they've sent out a rescue boat or a fishing boat's rescuing some survivors, but then they find out like quite quickly that the fishing boat that rescued some people then went down as well. And it's like, blah, blah. And then eventually we see an attack on an island, like a fishing island, and this is where it kind of really does the proper horror movie thing where you don't really see Godzilla. You can actually see like the side of his leg at one point if you're looking really closely, if you know what you're looking for. But there's a great moment where it's just a shot in a house that they've got on like a soundstage, and they're shaking the whole house, and there's like things falling around, and it cuts outside to like someone in the rain just screaming as they're watching this house being torn apart, and it's actually like horrific. It feels like a genuine terrifying scene, and I'm like, damn, this is atmosphere. This is mood. This is all these things.
Yeah, I mean, it goes right into it. Like you get to see Godzilla pretty quickly, I'd say. I mean, I know you only see like parts of him, but it's not like you're waiting around for Godzilla to like be awoken. You know, he's always there. He's always part of the main story. It's not, you don't have to go find him. I mean, it does take a while, I guess, for him to show up or to see his head over that hill, but
yeah, it's like 25-30 minutes into it.
Yeah, Kong takes 50 minutes.
Yeah. And obviously, like I said, there's a lot of the aftermath of what Godzilla's doing. You see his footprint, you see, all sorts of things on the build up to him. And we get our characters introduced. We have Dr. Yamane. Takashi Shimura plays him, who I've seen in a bunch of Kurosawa films. There's an Ikiru, for example.
He's got a great face.
Yeah. So he's there. You have the couple of Ogata and Emiko. But Emiko, like, everyone just assumed she was going to marry this other guy, the scientist named Serizawa. Like,
Isn't that her brother?
No, she says at one point that she treats him like or she's always thought of him as an older brother.
Okay.
But
I thought they were brothers.
No, because it was kind of like because the scene before that, like the other guy at the newspaper says, that they expect her to marry this dude. And part of the plot for the characters is that she's supposed to tell and break the news to Serizawa that she's intending on marrying Ogata, the other dude. So,
I thought it was just like a family thing.
No.
Like she doesn't want to tell him because he's, I don't know, not liked in the family, or like that he doesn't want her to get married anyway because it's her sister. But I guess it's wrong.
No. More
I've seen this movie a few times. I haven't picked up on that.
More of a love triangle thing.
Okay.
But it's once so it introduces those characters, right, and it introduces various things, and then there's a couple more attacks. I kind of loved. So they go out to this island and they see the Godzilla over the head, right, and it's an interesting first like appearance of him, and we get this explanation where Dr. Yamane says that, okay, this is probably, he theorizes this is a 2 million year old species that is sort of like a bridge between like a water creature and a terrestrial creature.
Because in his footprints, there are trilobites. Like living trilobites. They've been gone for a long time.
Yes, and he theorizes that, and I say theorize, he kind of proves as well. He gives enough evidence to suggest that he's right, which is that H-bomb testing, which the US was doing in areas near Japan, which is kind of what this is largely about, aside from just the aftermath of the actual, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, is that this awoke, and this is like destroyed wherever Godzilla was deep in the water, and that's why he's up now to but then of course they reveal that he's radiated and that something's happened, whatever this creature is, that clearly the radiation is affecting him as well, hence why he's got atomic breath later. And I think obviously the later films, I think, like, play with this, like the creation of Godzilla, and is he just like an old kind of dinosaur that's been affected by things or whatever. And I do love, like, as far as like for doing the sequels and for doing the modern movies, I'm all right with mythical, he's a protector of Earth or whatever. But for the context of this film on its own, and I think when you watch the original Godzilla, you have to view it as a finished work on its own that is not connected to anything else. It's just a movie with a message and it's doing its own thing. This all sounds fine. This is all solid stuff. But it's the filmmaking that gets me, because when it gets to the first attack on Tokyo, because there's two. The first one, what I love about it, it's after Emiko goes to see Serizawa, and he takes her into the basement and shows her his what he's discovered, right? And we don't get to see it at this point, but she's kind of horrified. She's not quite Fay Ray levels, but she does scream out in like terror at what she sees.
Help me.
And she leaves, but she doesn't actually tell him about her impending marriage. But when she goes back to the house where she lives with her dad and her husband to be is there as well, Agata's there as well. And I love how tranquil this moment is, because she sits down with a drink. Agata's sitting reading a book. Her father is just sitting looking at something, and then there's the other guy's there, and they're all just sitting there. It's in perfect quiet, and then all of a sudden the siren starts going off. This is one of these little things where I don't think I necessarily appreciate it on a first viewing as much, but watching it again, like just realizing the first time that he properly attacks a city, we're given this just like, this is just a normal family moment. Everyone's quiet, just doing their own thing. It's very peaceful. And then the siren comes in, and this
life-changing, earth-shaking event happens.
This force
that
of nature
destroys everything. Yeah.
And of course, I think before we talk about the rest of the messaging and stuff, we'll just talk about Godzilla's destruction and then the city and the effects, just because that was kind of a focus of the Kong side of things as well. I think you have some advantages here, and some disadvantages depending on what you're doing, because Godzilla was, or Kong, sorry, it was stop motion for the most part when it was Kong doing stuff. Godzilla, on the other hand, is a guy in a suit with miniature cities and stuff. So they both offer something different. They both have drawbacks and advantages, I think, in terms of what they're doing.
The eyes don't blink. Bummer.
Yeah, eyes don't blink. I do think the black and white really helps here, though.
Definitely. I think the thing that helps the most, I'm sure you're going to bring it up, is that Godzilla has really great music. I mean, Kong's music is pretty good too, but Godzilla has like this really big, ominous song. He shows up, you're like, this is dangerous.
There's several great tracks in Godzilla. Yeah, that main bit, the dan, 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 dan.
Yeah.
But
you see, that sounds like a horror film.
And then you also have the and the bit I always forget, but I also love, that plays a couple of times later on, is there's like a melancholy theme that's also kind of heroic. And we'll get to that, where that plays, but I think that's also very good. But I think the visuals of Godzilla, I keep mixing them up. It's really easy to swap them. But when Godzilla's in the city, so the first time he just like stomps on a train, he wrecks some stuff, but he doesn't do too much the first time. It's the second time where the instinct of the military is to build an electrified barbed wire fence.
I love this scene.
I love I mean, I would almost suggest that building a wall was something that someone stole from this, but he's not cultured enough to watch the Japanese Godzilla, so I'm not going to suggest it. but they try and electrocute him, and Godzilla just walks through it, and then that's when he uses atomic breath.
Yeah,
for the
he's
first
just
time.
angry now.
Yeah, he's just pissed. So he goes through Tokyo, just wrecking the place. And so I think the visual that sticks with me more than anything is when he's walking past the bridge and it's just the wall of flames behind him. It's just stunning. I still think Godzilla has that's really good because of his back, with the sort of the ridges and the fins and whatever, is that he has a good silhouette. Like Godzilla's silhouette is, well, it's iconic. I mean, there's really the only word for it.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I love the design of Godzilla. I think the only thing that is a disadvantage is that, you know, his eyes are like big and they're just there. They don't blink, which can look a little goofy, but because of the way it's shot, it's shot so well, and the black and white does help. And I think the music especially. Also, just to do another comparison here to Kong, Godzilla sounds better. He's got a cooler sound. He's got like this thing that really does feel big. I guess it's done with like a glove covered in resin over in like a bass, a string bass, which is able to get that really bellowing, deep, big sound. Whereas Kong is like a mixture of different big cats that are roaring, which is still like good, but there's something unnatural about Godzilla, and it does sound big, like bigger.
Yeah, you've got like, because you've got like a normal roar part of it, but then the ending of his roar is very distinct.
It's like there's like a reverence that comes through there. That's the wrong word, but you know what I'm talking. Reverberation.
Yeah, you go.
That's there. Like it's something big, you know.
Yeah, it feels gargantuan. It feels like larger than life, and you know, and Ishiro Honda talked about wanting to just sort of make the atomic bomb have a physical form and a presence, and that's kind of the point. And you know, we mentioned at the start that this was made less than a decade after those bombs were dropped in Japan. So, and I think that is probably very risky. I mean, I think there's a chance you release this in Japan so close to that event and people aren't like ready to see these images. But I think the general consensus I see from reading various articles and online is that it was almost like a cathartic part of healing, of seeing this represented in a way that would show kind of the after effects of it and treat it in a way that made it this force of nature. And I think the ultimate message of the film being about, okay, human beings made the atomic bomb and the H-bomb and so on, and we essentially created this unstoppable force that's never going to go away. Now it just exists. And that's kind of the importance of Dr. Serizawa's character, who creates this new like oxygen destroyer bomb, where and I think watching the film again, like his story in this, where he doesn't want to let it be used, and he's told Emiko about it, but he makes a promise never to tell anyone. And it's only after the proper, like the second rampage, the one where he's going through Tokyo and just decimates everything. And I love the scenes afterwards where the melancholy music plays, where we're seeing the makeshift hospitals. We see children crying over their dead parents as they're being carried away. We see like kids being tested for radiation and stuff like that. And it is properly horrific. And like the sequels don't really do this, because once you start getting to, there's like fairies who attract Mothra, and then there's like, you know, a giant three-headed thing that Godzilla's fighting, and we're all rooting for Godzilla. You don't do this in those movies. This is purely just in the
Godzilla is the monster. Yeah.
Or man is the monster. It's maybe more to the point. But you're right. No, Godzilla is a monster. He's a force of nature to be reckoned with.
He's not the good guy in this.
No, but I think the key thing in this, though, it's not. It represents something, but it's not really about himself. And I think because the ending of Serizawa's story is that he agrees to use the oxygen destroyer to maybe kill Godzilla. Okay, if this is the only thing that can kill Godzilla, I'll let you use it. But he burns everything, all of his notes, everything that lets anyone else know how to make it. And he intentionally, and I think he always intended to do this. I don't think this is a choice he makes in the spur of the moment. I think
he brings it up himself that he would have to kill himself.
He goes down the deep sea diving suit, and Ogata goes down with him, but Ogata goes back up and he stays down there. He cuts the line. He stays down there and commits suicide so that no one can ever... Because essentially the idea being that he realizes he's made the next stage. He's went past the H-bomb. He's made the next thing. And he's not willing to add that to the arsenal of the world. He
doesn't want to be Oppenheimer.
Yeah. So he makes this kind of like sacrificial choice that this can't exist. There has to be a line where this stops. And I think that's why what I like about the ending of I love the images of them going down in the suits, the music that's playing, them seeing Kong wake up because Kong's asleep in the water and he gets up.
Godzilla.
Sorry, Godzilla. Yes, thank you. And all of this is beautiful. I think all of this is just wonderful imagery. And then the end of the movie, though, it's Dr. Yamane on the boat after this has all happened, and they're not cheering because they beat Godzilla. This is not a victory. This is not the end of a Hollywood movie where they've beat the monster and everyone's like, hurrah, freedom, and shit. Yeah. The reason why this happened is still going on. Like, we're not done. Like, we've not actually solved the real problem, and I think that's kind of what gives it just that extra bit of a punch at the end. It's like,
no, his character is very sympathetic. He is. I don't understand why he made the bomb in the first place, but I think maybe it was just more accidental. Like I was doing research and I came across this, but
because he calls it a discovery, so I think the vibe I got was that he wasn't trying to make a weapon. He was just, because he said he was studying oxygen and all the things he could do with it, and he kind of stumbled into this.
Okay.
Which is very believable because a lot of things were stumbled in, like a lot of stuff that we use were accidentally invented or created. Like
time travel in Primer.
That's the best example you could have given. Yeah, because I think that's the other thing. Dr. Yamane, he's actually really upset when the army's first response to this is like, they just want to kill him. Like, that's the first thought, is just to kill Godzilla.
I think he's Yamane, but that's okay.
Yamane? Oh, sorry. I apologize. My Japanese dialect isn't
it's okay.
Isn't up to stuff. But but he's upset. He's like, all they want to do is kill him. Like, when we could learn so much about radiation, we could learn so much about how he survived this. We could improve like how we can survive this sort of thing from this.
You see, I mean, even after the destruction that Godzilla has caused in Tokyo, like there's a scene where he's depressed and in his like study, not eating with his family, and they're asking why, and the daughter says, well, he's a zoologist and he doesn't want to see Godzilla killed. Like, why not study him? Like, why not see how he's resistant to radiation? Because we all know that we're vulnerable to that here. So after our tragedy. But
yeah, and there's references to that. There's references. One of the characters flat out says that they barely escaped Nagasaki. Which would have been less than, like I say, a decade ago. So like, that's lingering. And I think even though Godzilla is more presented as this monolithic, villainous like force of nature, when you actually stop and talk about it, kind of some of the same things we said about Kong are kind of true, in the sense that he was in his natural habitat. In theory, he was happy enough, and human beings took that away from him. It's our fault that he had to come up to the top and start messing around with us. And I don't think this is intended, but just if you look at it from the perspective of some of the later movies where they say that he's like a guardian who restores balance, I do kind of like, if you want to, just as a thought process or thought exercise, like examine the original film through that lens where, okay, we've created nuclear weapons, so Godzilla's here to restore the balance and punish us for doing so. Rather than it being like a happenstance, it's an intentional, no, you need to be punished because you did this. Now, admittedly, is it fair that Japan's the one that gets punished? Not really, but...
Not really. No. I think it's more like a comparable to the day the Earth caught fire, where we're watching from the perspective of the UK and England, and they are feeling the effects of what other countries are doing, and because of nuclear testing and this big, one-upping the other country of like showing off their nuclear power, it has caused this unintentional consequence of now the whole world is going to be affected because we're going closer to the sun. It's knocked off our orbit. And
obviously, because obviously it's set in Japan because it was made in Japan, but there is a couple of lines that suggest that if they don't stop Godzilla, this will just lead to everywhere. Like, everyone's going to get destroyed eventually.
Right. So this is just an unintentional consequence of nuclear testing, is that we've awoken an ancient beast and brought him into our modern day when he should be sleeping or whatever he was doing in his underwater cave. And we've made him worse. We've made him radioactive.
And obviously, I agree that he's a villain in this, and in the simple terms. But I think if you look at it a bit, analyze it a bit more, I think you could argue that he's not really a villain. He's completely neutral. He's just a neutral force that doesn't. There's no like good or bad in Godzilla. It's not a cruelty thing. It's just like like I say, he was pulled from his natural habitat, and he's here.
He's pissed off because we destroyed his house.
Yeah.
and now he's here and he's a superpower, and we keep electrocuting him or shooting him or, you know, trying to destroy him, and each time it just makes him more mad, so he keeps destroying more.
Do you get the impression that the reason why that second time in Tokyo is so bad is because they try to kill him with the electric fence and stuff? Do you think he intentionally... Did you get the feeling that he acts out after that? Yeah.
Yeah. Because he definitely does way more destruction.
He does, yeah. He's all like, okay, you know what? You pissed me off now, so it's time to go stomping. You know? Stumpy stomp. Yeah, I like something about Godzilla speaks to me just so much more, because I think everything that it's talking about still kind of resonates. And like I say, there's elements of it, not big ones, but there's some little elements of like, hey, in this pandemic world, I'm even seeing other little things that maybe I'd never considered before that are sticking out to me, and how we react, and how no one really, you know, because that speech he gives at the end where he says, okay, we've solved this symptom, but this nuclear testing is still going on. That's still a problem. And if you're talking about the pandemic, it's like, okay, so you're trying to solve the spread of it, but no one, like, you know, like, and I'm not saying there's no vaccines, I'm saying that more could have been done at the start, per se, to stop it from getting this out of hand in the first place, in theory. But, you know, human beings being what we are, some people just have to party, and some people just have to... so on and so on. You know?
Yeah.
And that literally happens in Godzilla.
Not us, though, because we don't get invited to them. Just a couple of nerds. Not that I would go.
But we're heroes for that. That's not, you know, we are heroes. I mean, you're even vegan. Like you are saving the planet one meal at a time.
Thank you.
I save it every few meals at a time. I don't, not everyone.
Yeah, I understand.
Do my best. I think the other thing here that I like, and I'm saying this almost in reference to the second Godzilla film, which really goes into a love triangle, and it's really tedious. I don't like Godzilla Raids Again that much. But I think the love triangle in this one is kind of neat in that it sets up a little bit of context for these characters, just to give them a bit of personality. And it never actually tries to drain drama out of it. Like, it never becomes about that. It's just like in the background. Well, because so when Ogata goes to Serizawa to ask him to use the oxygen destroyer, and it's this really awkward scene because of what he's asking, but there's also this underlying, this is the new boyfriend saying, asking this, so there's a bit of a subtext to it. So when he gives him like his blessing, like before he dies, he's like, I wish you two a happy life together, you know, before he kills himself. It didn't come out, you know, it wasn't annoying because they've been doing this drama back and forth with awkward things. It don't dwell on it. It's just kind of there.
It's pretty secondary. Like, I wouldn't say that I care about the human characters. I probably do almost as much as I do in Kong, honestly, but I do think that there is at least more to them, and I think showing humanity as a whole in Japan and in the film, it affects me more than it does in Kong.
Yeah, I think that's what I mean, really, now you're bringing that up, is that it's not so much that I care that much about these three characters and the Doctor. I think it's more that they represent, like, because, you know, when we get the aftermath scenes of the destruction, it really feels that we get the human pain of what's happening. Whereas in Kong, there's scenes where he's attacking some people, and it's funny when he throws the woman away, don't get me wrong, great scene, right? But you don't really get the horror of it. Like, it's kind of like, okay, there's a monster going around, we have to deal with it, right? But in Godzilla, afterwards, it feels like a tragedy. It feels like, oh, this is like, you know, like 9/11. They're going to be talking about this day forever. Like, this is going to be a day. There's a memorial day. There's going to be statues. There's going to be plaques. There's going to be everything. It feels like a national tragedy, and it's just a different focus, of course, than what they're doing. But I think it speaks to me a little bit more because I feel it in Godzilla. So the sadness of the whole thing really speaks to me. I think treating like a monster coming to the city and causing chaos, and treating that like it is like a tragedy, because it's not like, I mean, it's not like other monster movies do that much. Like, I don't think take, you know, the American Godzilla films. Like, I mean, maybe the 2014 one is a little bit. We're going to be watching that soon, so we'll examine that closely when we watch it. But I mean, it's not like the Roland Emmerich one treats it like a tragedy or anything. That's just a big silly dumb movie.
No, but it also came out like before 9/11.
True.
I think 9/11 does change the way we view disaster movies in Hollywood.
Are you suggesting that maybe 2 atomic bombs landed in Japan and maybe changed how Japan looked at certain things for a while?
Well, yeah, totally.
Yeah,
Clearly.
I would agree with that.
But I'm saying the
sentiment.
Roland Emmerich one is not going to have the same kind of focus there.
Because I know you love that one, Tara, so I thought I'd bring it up.
How dare you? Stroke off.
Look, saying stroke off is great to anyone who watches Babylon 5. They'll get that joke. Everyone else is going to hear that and be like, what?
Right? It's such a bizarre insult. It's hilarious in Babylon 5, though.
That's
Even
great.
though I don't think it's supposed to be.
It's great. Enjoy our reviews that we do every week. We're almost done with season 1, and you can catch it on HBO Max now, the TV show itself. So join us and watch along.
And then
with
tell
us.
your friends.
Yes, and tell your friends. But yes, no, I love Godzilla. I think Godzilla is. I don't want to say perfect necessarily, but
No, it is great, though. Really great.
yeah, I think it's got the right combination of giving me enough of like character to care about. And like I say, it's not so much that the individual characters are there, but they're good conduits for representing humanity, I suppose, I guess is what I'm saying. Which is a tricky thing to pull off, because I think there's a lot of like other films where I think someone's trying to defend some crappy action movie. They'll be like, well, the characters are just like blank slates to represent the people. Nah, you're pulling that out of your ass. I think it works here though. And then I think the Godzilla stuff is great. Visually, it's stunning. The music's wonderful. I think the message is strong from start to finish. It's even more poignant at the end. And it ends on a dour note. The final note of music, as it says the end, is a sad piece of music. It's not, hey, we beat Godzilla,
Yeah.
everyone, yay!
Do you remember the first time you saw Godzilla? This version?
Yeah. I would have been probably just at the end of high school kind of age range.
Were you surprised that Godzilla turns into a skeleton and dies at the end? Knowing that there's like 800 sequels?
When the hydrogen, the oxygen destroyer goes off in the water, yes.
Yeah.
I guess a little bit, because I remember I imported a Criterion box set that had the first like 8 Godzilla movies in it on DVD. That was how I watched these for the first time, the first batch anyway. Yeah, I never watched the American cut. It's on the Blu-ray. It was on the DVD I had. I've never found myself wanting to see the Americanized cut where they inserted.
I wouldn't mind watching it just to.
It's curiosity, yeah. Because basically, if you don't know, there's a version called Godzilla King of the Monsters, which came out in 1956, I think it was, 2 years later, where they shot like scenes of like an American reporter who's trying to get the story about Godzilla as it's happening. So there's these like English inserts of all these scenes of this guy. And I've never watched it, so I can't really describe it any more than that. But I understand that's what they've done to it.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind seeing it just to see how that plays out.
yeah.
My blob of a cat up there.
Yes, Godzilla's
He's got no shame.
He's had his dinner and he's going to lie up there. Yes.
Come on, Gus. Suck it in a little.
I mean, maybe
Good
when we do one of the sequels or something, we can watch the King of the Monsters cut just for like a brief opinion on what it's like. Or something.
I might check it out.
I don't know. But no, Godzilla's wonderful. So, yeah. So I don't want to downplay King Kong too much, right? But when I'm getting to comparing them, I see Godzilla as this really important film that still holds up, that I think is hauntingly beautiful to this day. And then King Kong, I think, is a really important part of film history, but I don't necessarily actually get as much out of it or enjoy it as much. I think there's a clear divide for me between the two. One is important but very dated to me, and the other one is like still just as important and as great as it probably was the day it came out. So I guess with that said, and you can give a final statement too, when I ask you this, what are you rating both films?
Okay. King Kong versus Godzilla, round 1.
Ding, ding.
I do like Godzilla more. I do think it's a overall better film, but I was surprised at how much I did really enjoy King Kong, and I do think there's some really heavy moments in the film that got to me, and I found it like just a fascinating watch, just knowing the year it came out and the limited like knowledge they had of special effects, and so they basically had to invent special effects in order to make the movie. that I think just, yeah, as a piece of cinema history, it is just as fascinating to watch. There are some problematic elements to the film, you know, there is some racist and some sexist elements that I wish could be avoided, but they're there. But I think still overall, I do think it's a really fun watch. I like that that Land of the Lost style going into this jungle where these ancient creatures exist. It is still pretty fun. So I'm going to rate it a bit high. I'm going to give it a 9. I do think it's great. And I really enjoyed it. Godzilla, I know I love. I've watched it before, and it is really great. All the themes are definitely there, and they are a bit stronger, if not much more strong. But again, I don't think it's perfect, but I think it's pretty close. So that one I'm going to give a 9.5.
Okay.
Heavy hitters. Yeah.
So I am going to go a little bit lower on Kong. I'm going to give King Kong a very solid 8 out of 10. Like, I think it's an important film, and I think there's a lot of merit in watching it and a lot to get out of it. But it's essentially just the world's first B movie in a lot of ways. In a lot of ways. Whereas I don't think Godzilla. There's nothing about Godzilla to me that feels B movie. Godzilla to me feels like an important story that has a message, and it's really funny to me that Ishiro Honda, who directed the film, went on to do a lot of the sequels, because the sequels are just goofy fun by comparison. Yeah. You know, but clearly he was up for having fun. It's just like, he wanted to do a serious film, and then he went on to do some silly things, which we enjoyed.
Is it kind of like the Night of the Living Dead, where the first one is like really saying something, and then the sequels are all just, let's just watch zombies eat each other or eat people?
Dawn of the Dead is even better than Night of the Living Dead, so I take umbrage with that comment.
I don't know. I've never seen them, so I don't know.
Dawn's a 10. Tara, Dawn is a 10.
It's on my list. Maybe Halloween.
I mean, some people love Stand Up for Day. I think Days is easily the weakest of the three, but Night and Dawn are both they're both like classics that you have to see. They're masterpieces.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Oh my god.
I know the themes in the first one, and I just assumed the sequels were all schlock.
Oh no. So the first one obviously has its own things, but the second one is about commercialization. It's like, I mean, compared to Zack Snyder's version, it's like, oh come on, it's night and day. No pun intended. No pun intended.
Anyway, I cut you off.
Yeah. Oh, Dawn's wonderful. Dawn of the Dead. I recommend Dawn of the Dead, everyone. Yes. So 8 out of 10 for Kong. Godzilla is special. It's a masterpiece, and it only gets stronger every time I watch it. 10 out of 10. Boom.
Boom.
There you go.
There it is.
And I think is that the first time I've given something a 10 that you didn't also give a 10? Because I feel like you've given a couple of 10s where I only went like a 9 or something like that. But that may be the first time that I've given a 10 that you've rated the other thing lower.
I think you gave Terminator 2 a 10.
Oh, maybe.
And I did not.
Okay, all right. That's one. I assume you give that like a 9.5 though.
I did.
Yeah, okay. All right, I can live with that. So there you go. So hopefully, talking about the two movies, I'll admit the opening kind of divulged into just comparing them immediately, because it was almost impossible not to.
Hey, that's what this was for, right?
Yeah.
Godzilla versus Kong, Kong versus Godzilla.
In my head, that went at the end, but whatever. I mean, it's what, you know, we go with the flow. It's fine. So that is Godzilla, and it's King Kong. So the plan is not the next week's episode is not this. Next week's episode is actually a new film coming out on Netflix, a Korean film, which Tara's clearly not looking forward to. The audio people didn't get.
The trailer was bad.
Face is pulled. We're looking at Space Sweepers next week, which is a new Netflix film that's out on February 5th. So you can watch it when it hits on Netflix. So yes, so we're doing that. But then over the next month, we will be doing Kong Skull Island. We'll be doing Godzilla King of the Monsters, and then of course when it hits, we'll be doing the new Godzilla versus King Kong.
Mm-hmm.
And that stupid ape is going down. That's all I'm saying.
Maybe we should get Matt on the show for that
one. Matt will be very opinionated on this. Even though the trailer makes it pretty clear that there's going to be a bit of a twist that is, I think, quite obvious, but I won't say anything else. Otherwise, spoil it for anyone who's not realised or figured it out. but
Yeah.
I'm just excited to see something else. I'll just say that. Something else. So, yes. If you made it this far into the review, please put the words atomic. See, for once, one of the movies we were looking at actually was related to our title. So, atomic. And the comments to let us know you got this far. Tara's going to pose for the thumbnail. So, Tara, 3, 2, 1, pose.
I'm trying to, I should do it again.
You can do it again.
I'm trying to be Kong,
It was a fine attempt.
and you could be Godzilla.
Okay, I don't know how do I pose as Godzilla? You've given me the hard one.
You have to just edit atomic breath and go.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. 3, 2, 1. Pose.
There we go. You get to deal with that.
I get to deal with. I'll probably have to flip you because your arm's going to be right in front of my face if I put it up as it is.
That's okay.
Oh dear. Let's see what the 1 out of 10 reviews are on IMDb for these two bad boys, because I suspect they're going to be silly. Believe it or not, there is only one-star review for King Kong.
Whoa.
It's titled "No Emotion or Memorable Dialogue Equals Terrible Film," and then there's a spoiler-filled review. That's from 2011, from Ben Skill. How many reviews are the total? Out of 525 reviews, only 1-star review.
Wow.
And then, whoa, this is weird. Godzilla also only has one-star review.
What?
Yeah.
It's like they're both great movies or something.
From 2017, from Miss Asriel, I think that says. What's with the voices is the title of this. Hold on. I think this person watched the dub version and doesn't understand what dubbing is the gist I'm getting from glancing at this review. So I'm going to say that review is null and void. There's 232 reviews for the original Godzilla on here, so clearly not many people watching a foreign film. I guess that makes sense, but hey,
Yeah.
cool. That said, though, IMDb's worldwide, so I mean, why wouldn't there be a bunch of Japanese reviews of Godzilla potentially? Anyway, this has been Godzilla versus. Or, it's not been Godzilla, it's been Godzilla and King Kong, the two separate original films. Hopefully you enjoyed our discussions of these two classics. Let us know what you think of either one or both down below in the comments. Before I die. And you can, of course, like, subscribe, all those things. They're very important. They're the free way to support us. And we also mentioned patreon.com/MailFuzzTV earlier. Tara, would you like to promote anything else we do before we head off?
Well, we already promoted Babylon 5, so if you're a fan of black and white, I guess check out our Twilight Zone reviews. We've been working our way through the original Twilight Zone series. We're working through season 3 at the moment, and it's been fun. It's been fun revisiting and some episodes for the first time, so check that out. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's pretty much us. Get us on Twitter at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. And just to remind you, we're doing Space Sweepers next week. So look forward to... Tara, give it a chance. Promise me you're going to give it a chance.
Fine.
So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching science fiction and computer at Salsa.
Was Beauty that killed the Beast?